Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome and thanks for coming along this evening. I'm Kate Jones. I'm the project officer on the Severn B-Lines project, and here with my Kaitlyn, who is the conservation assistant on the Severn B-Lines project and who is running our webinar today. We just want to say thank you for your time this evening and for coming along to this. We are recording this webinar. It's just started recording now. All of your cameras and microphones are automatically muted, so don't worry about that, and it will be available on YouTube later for you to watch if you have to leave early or if you have indeed arrived late. So yes, I will briefly run over what our project is about, maybe 2-3 minutes, and then we'll get into Kaitlyn's presentation and her workshop. So the Severn B-Lines project, it's a year-long project. It started in December and it runs until March 2022. It is the only B-Lines project in the West Midlands, and me and Kaitlyn are the staff on it. So what are B-Lines first? Some of you might be asking. B-Lines are the result of a 10-year mapping process conducted by BugLife with lots of different partners and stakeholders. And essentially, they mapped all of our wildflower-rich habitats that are good for our pollinators and lots of other wildlife. So our SSSIs, our nature reserves, and then used a mapping process. I'm not a mapping whiz, so I don't know the technical details, but essentially they use the paths of least resistance to connect all those habitats up, and mapped a highway that runs across the whole of the UK and connects up all our wildflower-rich habitats with these 3-kilometre wide pathways. You can see there on that picture, that's the pathway running from Bridgnorth to Telford, where we're focusing this year. Now we're in the delivery stage, and our job is to fill those 3-kilometre wide pathways with wildflowers to connect up those habitats and allow our pollinators and other wildlife to move freely through the landscape. It's one of the Green Recovery Challenge Fund projects. The funding is administered by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and we're working with partners, including private landowners and local town councils. We're creating and restoring wildflower-rich habitat, including arable margins, species-rich grassland on agricultural land, and also jazzing up amenity grassland with more flowers, basically. And everyone can help, and that's what we're going to go into a little bit more through the webinar and afterwards. Could you go to the next slide, please, Kaitlyn?
Of course.
Thank you. So very quickly, what we've been up to so far, we've had a very busy summer, and here's some photos highlighting what we've done. So we've done loads of events and loads of training with people. We've had pollinator workshops teaching people how to tell the differences between some of the key groups of pollinators so that they can carry out citizen science, namely the flower insect time counts, so we can keep our finger on the pulse of what is happening to our pollinators. We've also run botany workshops to enable people who are perhaps volunteering or even creating their own meadows in their gardens, or helping out with other organisations to monitor and see the changes that they are contributing to. And how the success of their meadow creation projects, essentially. We've also been running pop-up events. You can see us there with our stalls. So we do craft activities with kids. We've been handing out free wildflower seeds for people to plant. And we've been asking people to make pollinator pledges. So we've got, quite a funny one there with little Lucy, the Sprocker Spaniel. And we've had volunteer help getting involved with the actual practical on the ground work. You can see that picture at the bottom there with people chucking hay around. That was our green hay strewing volunteer day. So we're creating a wildflower meadow, kickstarting the restoration of one. And what we had to do was create bare ground, and then we took a cut of hay straight from a really species rich, wildflower-rich hay meadow, and we cut it and transported it within the day to the receptor site and scattered all that lovely hay over the receptor site. And what we're waiting and hoping for to happen is those wildflower seeds to drop out, make contact with that bare soil, germinate, and we'll have hopefully the start of a more species-rich meadow in the years to come. So without further ado, really, I will hand over to Kaitlyn. We've got, I think we've got a really nice webinar in store, and it's something a little bit different from our usual offerings of pollinator workshops and botany workshops. So I'll hand over to you, Kaitlyn, if that's okay.
Of course. Thank you very much, Kate. So just to reiterate what Kate said there, everybody, thank you so much for attending this evening. Yes, and welcome to Mystery and Folklore. Kick off a little bit about me. Who's this lady talking to you about nature? My name is Kaitlyn. Yes, so I've been on the project since kind of mid-May, and my background is in wildlife conservation. I studied at Nottingham-Trent University, and my main kind of experiences with environmental education and a little bit of storytelling, public outreach, and kind of just general customer-facing roles. So I'm really passionate about working with people. I've also had quite a passion for history, and always love learning new things, and that has definitely not stopped when it's come to folklore and myths and legends, all that stuff. So my passion for nature started when I was very young. Actually, I remember going on holiday with my parents and my family, and we actually saw a show at SeaWorld in Florida. And although my views and opinions of the place have changed since then, I actually remember very fondly kind of watching those people in the show, hearing about what marine biology and marine conservation was, and thinking that that's what I want to do. I was so inspired by the animals and seeing, what conservation stuff meant at the time. Obviously, like to 5 or 6 year old Kaitlyn, it didn't mean very much. But as I got older, I definitely realised that conservation felt a lot more important to me, and kind of eventually led me here working for Bug Life. And I think what has developed as the most important thing to me is sharing that passion with others. And if I can bestow upon anybody inspiration or the same passion that I have for nature, even in the smallest way, I think that feels like mission accomplished for me. And that's definitely what I want to try and do with you all this evening. So welcome to nature. And obviously this is going to be a little bit different. I don't know about how it is outside for where you lot are, but it's a bit gloomy and rainy outside at the minute. So maybe this will be quite a comforting little virtual outdoor adventure for you this evening. So the purpose of today's webinar is to take you out of your own reality, if you will, for about an hour or so, and show you some of the amazing, quite wonderful and almost unbelievable things that plants and trees can do, have been known for, what they're used for, the lore and the mystery behind them. And as we walk through, please feel free to leave any comments or questions about what resonates with you. If you know any local legends or anything like that yourself. Obviously the project is based in Shropshire for us, but it'd be great to see what anybody else has or knows about in their local area too. And also maybe just a thing to think about and share if you want to in the comments with us or the chat today. Something that you're grateful for about nature would be really nice to see. What people are already passionate about, what people are already grateful for about their local area or the local woods that you like to visit, or if you're lucky enough to be able to go down to the seaside, anything like that. Be great to see. So before we start, I think there's a few things that we need to just clear up. So let's start with nature connection itself. So as it states here, nature connectedness includes an understanding of nature, the extent to which we as individuals include it as a part of our identity. And this includes the good, the bad and the ugly, I suppose. Kind of includes the things that we associate positively and negatively with about nature. And I know it gets me too that environmental issues that we see on the news can sometimes quite feel very heavy. The news kind of bombards us with all of this information that kind of leaves us with feeling a little hopeless, really. It's obviously an important message to get across with things like climate change and all these big, important global issues that we're facing at the minute. But sometimes hearing or seeing all that negativity all the time, it's just very overwhelming. And if we're not left in a position where there is a little bit of hope, or we hear about the good things that people are doing as well, it can kind of lead to a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, create a lot of uncertainty around the environment and nature and what's happening with it. And where anxiety or uncertainty it kind of is founded, it leads to a lot more anxiety and ultimately a disconnection with what nature actually is, what it can actually mean to us, whether that's on a global or a very local scale, or even in your just your back garden. And hello, Kate. Yes.
Really sorry to interrupt at a crucial point. As with all good webinars, we run into a bit of technical difficulty.
Oh no.
In that the chat isn't open. I can't write in it either. And I was wondering if, as the host, you were able to open the chat so that you can write in it.
Sorry, everybody. Give me 1 second.
Apologies, everyone. The reality of webinars.
Because the chat, I can't seem to do anything either. What is happening?
Oh, Helen Davidson has just written in it.
Yes. Oh, there you go.
Yes, can.
Yes.
Charlotte has as well.
Oh,
okay. We have got people writing in the chat. For some reason, I can't write in the chat. It's probably something I've done wrong. But yes, I was just going to pop a message in the chat, just reiterating what you said. If anybody wants to make any comments or put any of their nature memories in, or what they're grateful for, then please do. I'm going to be quiet and let you get back to it, Kaitlyn.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Kate. Thank you for bringing that to attention there. Yes, where were we? So we were talking about all the doom and gloom, weren't we, for a second there? Yeah, it's easy to forget what nature means to us and its benefits, whether that's physical, mental health. I don't know about you all, but it really means a lot to me just being able to step outside some days and go into a woodland or go through a meadow and not hear any cars driving by, or not hear or see anything from a bustling town, or see any buildings in the distance. It kind of really gives me that sense of freedom that sometimes you can't always have in quote unquote modern day life. So building that connection with nature is extremely vital for nature itself, for all the wildlife that it contains, and also us. It forms a huge part of our well-being. And just like pollinators, just like insects, just like all wildlife out there, and kind of like the goals of the Severn B-Lines project to create habitat corridors or create that connectivity all over the country, we need that access to nature as well. It helps us in ways that we might not initially realise. So what I hope that we can get out of this brief hour this evening is a feeling powerful, adventurous, and maybe a bit excited to get out into nature and explore it in a different way that you might not have considered before. We're naturally curious people as humans, and always drawn to nature. It's kind of instinctually a part of us to want to explore it, because it's what we associate with life and security and just general happiness. And there are numerous ways to connect to nature, even if it's just knowing a little bit more about it. And I think that brings us quite nicely to the subject of this evening's webinar. So to quickly whittle down what folklore, what myth and what legend actually is. Folklore is essentially traditional beliefs, customs, stories of a community or people passed down by generations through word of mouth. Splitting the word up itself actually is, folk means people and lore means the stories and the traditions. They're usually fictitious, normally more of maybe like an old wives' tale, that kind of a thing. Something that people have believed in a community, but doesn't necessarily have a scientific factual basis or anything like that. But you never know, some might, be a bit more real than others. A myth is a genre of folklore usually defined by a main protagonist that's often quite grand in stature. It can be quite godlike or supernatural. Can also cover quite unbelievable events, that kind of a thing. And they're generally considered or accepted to be unreal and something of fiction, work of fiction. A legend is slightly different. It's typically a traditional story that sometimes is popularly regarded as kind of fitting into history, but it's not fully authenticated. A great example of this would be the legend of King Arthur. We all know about, him and his knights of Camelot, Merlin, and its ties to the Glastonbury area, that kind of a thing. So there might be something there in history about who King Arthur actually was that we haven't quite yet discovered officially, but the stories and the legends around him will remain that way until such a time as we discover. And the UK shares quite a lot of its history and folklore in this sense with Europe and to a certain extent the rest of the world for some stories and fiction and that kind of a thing. But in the UK, I think it's quite nice that each county has developed its own folklore, its own traditions and legends and beliefs associated with plants and flowers and all that kind of stuff around them in nature. So a few in Shropshire are the Wrekin giants, of how the hills were formed. There was a bit of a punch up between two big giants, one imprisoned, the other in the hill, and he's there to this day, moaning and groaning away. Another one that's quite nice that I don't have time to cover today, but is the forming of the River Severn. That's quite a lovely story, a lovely folk tale. And I do have some book recommendations later on if you would like to learn a little bit more about all of these different stories. But generally, everything normally has a story to tell us. They're all kind of tied to nature in their own individual way, whether it's more of a lesson we need to learn, a warning, a fable, or even an instructional thing that tells people what to do at a certain time of the year. They're all tied together in quite in their own magical way, really. So now that we know what that's all about, let's take a step into our walk. Now, if I can take you out of wherever you're sitting at the minute, maybe you're in your living room, in your room at home. Hopefully, if it's raining, maybe you're not outside this evening. But if you can imagine that you're on the edge of a meadow in a nice ancient woodland, maybe hear the sound of a river running alongside, perhaps the River Severn if you live in the area. Hear some bees humming and the wind rustling the leaves and the grass. What does it smell like? Can you smell the wildflowers? Can you smell maybe some fresh trimmed grass, anything like that? Or kind of imagine what it feels like to touch some of those grass seeds, or run your fingers through a pile of leaves or anything like that. And you please feel free at home to maybe just take a couple of deep breaths and really immerse yourself in these thoughts or these feelings, and just connect to what this means in your own little way. And whenever you're ready, let's move on to the king of the forest himself, is the English oak. So it's normally the first thing that we'll spot on any walk. How can you miss an oak tree? They're huge, they have a commanding presence, and they're usually the thing that kind of emerges tallest out of all of the trees or in the middle of a meadow. The oak itself houses more species, or more life, I should say, than any other native tree in the UK. And that even includes its leaf litter when it kind of scatters around on the floor in autumn time. Fosters quite a lot of biodiversity. It's one of the most popular trees in the UK, and we could probably have a whole webinar, a whole discussion on the folklore of oak trees and the history of them, what they've been used in. I think if we sat here for a good couple of hours, we would be finished about what the oak's been up to for the rest of its history. But the most kind of common ones you'll see in the UK are the English or the common / peduncular oak, or the sessile ones, which can be distinguished between how their acorns hang off the tree. And there's a lovely old little rhyme about the oak before the ash will surely get a splash. If it's the ash before the oak, we'll surely get a soak, which kind of tells us about the kind of weather that we can expect over the summer. You know, this kind of, we can see which leaves arrive earliest in the year. So we're probably around springtime, or, you know, we can start seeing what's coming up first, and that used to help people figure out what kind of a year it was going to be. And obviously, you know, relating to crops and stuff like that, it was quite important to know what was going on, if it could be foretold, that kind of thing. With its grand stature, the oak has always symbolized power, used by kings of old. I mean, their crowns, they used to weave branches together to place on the king's head. And it would kind of act as a symbol and almost like a conduit for godly power, giving the king his right to rule over the land, kind of in place of the gods upstairs. So oak is always related to very powerful gods, especially thunder gods. So like Zeus and Thor. Well, we have Thursday actually, which is Thor's day. So even we have a day of the week that relates to the oak itself. And being so large in itself, to tie into the thunder gods and make a little bit more sense. The oak is, like we said, normally the biggest tree in the forest and the most likely to be struck by lightning. So it was thought that if an oak tree was struck, and especially if it was you found some mistletoe in the tree, it had been placed there by the gods, and it was seen as a gift, it was seen as something to celebrate. And people would also take branches if it had fallen off, or kind of have a little bit off the tree of one struck by lightning, and place it in their homes, usually across a window or across a hearth or a fire, a doorway, to protect them from getting hit by lightning, because what are the chances of the same tree being struck by lightning again? And it was a tree that was revered and quite sacred to the Druid people. Well, Druid itself actually means oak man or something to that effect. And Druids would gather in oak groves to hold meetings, perform ceremonies. Oaks actually formed a huge part of, and just probably still do to this day, Druidic life and culture. And maybe moving on to some slightly more famous oak-related legend. King Arthur's table, where his knights sat, was supposedly meant to be formed of a huge cut of an oak tree, and the thought behind this was it was to mirror the strength and the power that the king himself had, to show that, you know, he was ready to protect his land, and his knights were also there to do the same job. And supposedly King Arthur was laid to rest in the remnants of an old hollowed oak, and is buried in Glastonbury Abbey. If anybody has actually been there, you'll see that there's a plaque that says this is where King Arthur lays. And if you believe the legend, he's still there, waiting for the day when his kingdom needs him the most. And some other famous oaks would include the Royal Oak, where King Charles II hid from the Roundheads after defeat at the Battle of Worcester in 1651. And that tree became very famous. You know, it hid him, it allowed him to live. And so now we celebrate on the 29th of May as Royal Oak Day. We have a pub just down the road actually that's called the Royal Oak, so it's very popular in this area, in Malvern Hills as well. It's something that is definitely carried over into the surrounding area. and definitely something to be very proud of. And I'm a Leicester gal originally, so this one I remember going to this place when I was very young, Bradgate Park. If anybody else has been, you may have seen all of the weird and strange looking oaks in the area. They were pollarded to mourn the beheading of Lady Jane Grey in 1554. To mourn her loss, basically. She was queen for 9 days and was accused of treason and was unfortunately beheaded. And that's apparently why the oaks on the hill are in the state that they are today, due to this horrible affair. And maybe a slightly more positive note of the oak there is I've got there's the ones at Bradgate Park there, beautiful, lovely old trees, but a little bit mangled and a bit creepy. And there's major oak at Sherwood Forest. Obviously, we've got Robin Hood and his merry men that would hide out there and steal from the rich, give to the poor, all that good stuff. Or maybe not good stuff, I wouldn't condone that now. But yeah, some beautiful old oak trees. And definitely with a lot of lore and a lot of history behind them. So let's take a pause from the lovely old oak trees for a second, and let's step into the meadow. We're walking down a path, a nice trim path, and we might just stop for a second, have a look around, and spot some quite familiar looking plants. So we have the dandelion and the stinging nettle. Obviously, some things that you might not like to see, especially if it's in your own garden at home, or if we've all been stung by a nettle before, we know that it's not the most pleasant, especially if you've accidentally put your arm or your whole leg in a bush. Definitely not a nice thing to experience. But these guys have actually got quite a lot of healing properties or healing things associated with them, some quite useful characteristics and lore associated with them. So let's start with the dandelion. The seeds, when you blow them or kind of knock them off, are thought to be fairies. And if you blew all the seeds away, it was said that you were releasing the fairies and you could make a wish. But kind of on the opposite side of that is that if you could catch one of these seeds, the fairy would then kind of be bound to you and have to make this wish come true for you to let it go. So kind of both sides of the coin there. I think I'd prefer that there were fairies being let go, but I don't know about you. And also, despite their reputation as a weed, dandelions are actually very good for the health of the soil. They help bring up nutrients from very deep in the soil, or that their roots can reach, excuse me, and help aerate it and bring those nutrients up to the top and help out all the other plant life around it. It's visited by 93 different species of insect, including some pollinators. So it's a great source of nectar and pollen for very early in the year when some other flowers aren't out and about yet. And the whole plant is actually a great healer, or thought to have great healing properties. Covers from tip to toe, if you will, that the roots are actually thought to have a cleansing effect on the body, act as a diuretic on the kidneys, treat gout, joint pain, headaches, pretty much anything that you can think of. Dandelion is thought to cure it. And it contains, surprisingly, more, I think, mainly A, B, and C vitamins than quite a lot of fruits and vegetables. So if you, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't really want to eat it now. But it's obviously used in quite a lot of traditional or homeopathic medicine, that kind of thing, and to be quite a healing plant. And stinging nettle, same kind of similar bad reputation, I suppose, as a bit of a weed or something that's a bit unsightly to see. Yeah, like we said about it stinging, I think we can maybe all agree that when it's in flower, it still stings. So that little tale isn't very true. But apparently, if you grab it at the stem and kind of give it a bit of a pull out that way, if you want to harvest it, it doesn't sting as much. But I'm not gonna force you to go out and try that. But of course the sting is a response to grazing. If the plant's trying to protect itself, it's just something that it's evolved over time. You know, just all the little creatures of the forest eating it. Some uses: it was used as a coagulant to make and flavour cheeses, and also as an expectorant. I think it was used as more of a gargle to provoke urine and wind. If you had a bit of a stomach issue or anything like that, it would kind of clear you out, in the nicest way of saying it. And there's a lot of things that it's supposedly a cure for as well. Dog bites and hemlock poisoning, and also for baldness, apparently. It's none of these things. It doesn't cure any of those things, unfortunately. But they didn't stop bald men in medieval times from kind of mixing up a tincture and putting it on their hair to try and stop the hair from falling out. Excuse me. But if we flash forward to a bit more modern, excuse me 1 second. During shortages in the First World War and also the Second, it was the nettle fibres and dye made from the leaves was used to make uniforms and give them their signature green kind of camo army colour. So maybe a bit more historical kind of context there for you, but hopefully gives you an idea that maybe not all of these quote unsightly plants that you might see in your area aren't so bad after all. And while we're in the meadow, let's take a look at some other beautiful little plants that you might see around and about. They might not be out at the minute, you know, we're kind of going into more of the autumn season now. So unfortunately, some wildflowers may have kind of gone over, but you might still see a couple just scattered about, hanging on. So all of these ones here are actually quite well known for their healing properties, you know, similar to how dandelion was over there. So if we start with devil's bit scabious, it's closely related to the the daisy family. It's a beautiful flower. It's definitely one of my favourites, and it's, you know, pollinators love it. You can see there's a little guy on there buzzing away, probably collecting some pollen, you know, on that picture right there. Gets its name apparently from the fact that the devil didn't like its healing properties or its ability to cure people, and angrily bit at its roots and tore them off, and gives the roots its appearance that it does today. Kind of a bit scraggly looking, but it didn't take away its healing properties, which is good news for everybody else. And apparently, if you boil the roots, it could cure all sorts of things. Again, similar to dandelions, snake bites, swollen throats, put it on a wound or a bit of a scar, and it would help you out. And also the plague, which was, I suppose, back in the day, quite a useful thing to think. We've got the lovely meadow buttercup, probably some of the pride and joy of British countryside. I suppose we've all taken a buttercup at some point and see if we like butter by holding it under our chin and seeing if it turns yellow. I know I definitely did that as a kid. But all buttercups actually contain an unpleasant chemical that means that cattle can't really digest them very well. It's actually poisonous to cattle, but luckily they tend to steer clear of them anyway. And again, if you mix the roots of the buttercup up with some salt, it was another one to cure the plague. And apparently it would kind of create blisters along the skin that would thought to be drawing out the disease and cure you. And St John's wort is probably the most related to healing of all three here. Apparently hanging it in windows or in doorways would kind of protect you from the devil, protect you from evil. And if you were thought to be possessed by the devil or something evil, all you had to do was kind of scatter St John's wort around your home, and it would kind of deter him or eventually bring out the evil that was possessing you. It's named after St John the Baptist, and supposedly because of there's a red oily pigment that kind of seeps out of the plant, and I suppose then kind of ties into how it's thought to cure wounds or help heal wounds. It was quite a popular thing during the Crusades, where the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem used the plant to heal the wounds of the Crusaders, and they followed something called the doctrine of signatures, which stated that, excuse me, talking too much. Excuse me 1 second. Oh, that's better. The doctrine of signatures was something that stated that a plant would help cure the part of the body that it resembled. Now, St. John's wort doesn't really resemble a part of the body, but it said that if you hold up a leaf towards the light, you can see that it's got kind of punctures or perforations over the leaf that resemble a wound. And also, like we said, kind of would seep with this oily kind of red liquid that symbolizes the wounds of battle. And but mostly today it's kind of used for mood disorders. It's used in quite a traditional, or sorry, more natural remedies for depression and seasonal affective disorder and stuff like that. I saw it in Boots just the other day, actually, funnily enough. So it's definitely still has some healing properties associated with it. Another one that you might spot kind of around in the meadow area, one of my favourites is the foxglove. It's another one that's fantastic for insects, and you probably see loads of bees kind of buzzing around it. And in the summer months, I know there's been loads around here, definitely this year. It's the foxglove itself is famous for its bell-shaped flowers that in Latin supposedly mean finger-like, which kind of may give it a more scientific and realistic reason for its name. But it's also said to be the fairy flower, and fairies would live in the little bells, and they would kind of encourage or help out foxes to put the bells themselves on their paws to silence them and protect them from hunters. Excuse me, but the white ones, unfortunately, are associated with witches, and excuse me, like most white flowers, if you brought them into the home, it was considered unlucky, and also to some extent, like you were bringing death or misery into the house, which is, I guess, we associate with white with a lot of purity and innocence now. So a bit of a backward thinking there, maybe, but obviously still quite a traditional belief. One of the most interesting things I found about foxglove is that they could be used to detect changelings. So what would happen is they would place a child or whoever was seeming to be infected with a changeling or a fairy or possessed by something on a spade. They would give them a tincture made from foxglove, usually with 3 drops, and they would kind of throw them out the door 3 times, casting out the demon or casting whatever was inside them, supposedly. And if they were possessed by something, the fairy or the spirit within them would die. If not, then the child or whoever it was would probably be left traumatized and likely very ill from the use of the foxglove, because the whole plant itself kind of can induce nausea if ingested, and even kidney and heart problems. So digitalis is used now as a drug to treat heart conditions or heart disease, that kind of thing, because the toxin inside it actually slows the heart rate and kind of reduces your blood pressure. And obviously, if you have too much of it, it can be a bit deadly and fatal. But obviously, used in a nice way or in a controlled way, isn't actually all that bad. So quite a useful thing for the foxglove there. Now let's take a step away from the meadow and maybe move a little bit closer to the water's edge and see if we can spot some other beautiful trees. Now this one is definitely one of my favourites. The willow, I think it's such a beautiful tree, and its associations are quite beautiful as well. It's a tree of an enchantment and inspiration, a symbol, it was a symbol of love and happiness. But now it's more so connected to grief and has maybe slightly more sinister associations. It was kind of considered a bit of a witchy tree, like some others as well. And traditionally the wood of gallows, and some Irish folklore kind of tells that in the middle of the night, the trees are capable of uprooting themselves and following lost or weary travellers home. But some good things associated with it are that it is kind of the first known case of where salicylic acid comes from, which we now associate with aspirin. So the bark is quite a powerful painkiller, and I think it was first discovered when treating pregnant women that were having a bit of discomfort during their pregnancy. And obviously it's kind of progressed, and eventually it was kind of refined and made into a more, I guess, easy way to ingest it rather than having a good chew on some bark. And it was also considered quite a lucky tree. If you would tie a knot in one of its quite bendy branches, which are commonly used for weaving still today, and were used for baskets and boats, all sorts of things. Tying this knot, especially unbroken, you could then make a wish. And if this wish came true, you would then return to the tree where you took the branch from and tie the knot and thank the tree. Now, some stories will say that if you do not do this, then you might have some more sinister things happen to you after your wish has been granted. But the willow itself is quite a peaceful tree. But maybe don't tell your secrets to it, because it's supposedly a bit of a chatterbox, with its leaves kind of blowing in the wind. Apparently secrets can easily flow from one tree to tree, especially when told underneath a willow. Another lovely one here that is quite often seen growing near water, the lovely hazel. Obviously we get some nice little hazelnuts that grow off this tree. And the hazel itself is a tree of knowledge and wisdom, and is said to be quite an inspirational tree as well. It was the tree of bards and poets that would in the bardic tradition would associate it with the number 9. Kind of maybe lead into that in just a second as well. But in numerology, 9 is considered quite a wise number, and kind of ties it all in quite nicely with the rest of its lore. The hazelnuts themselves were considered the receptacles of wisdom, and in of themselves could cure all number of things, fevers, coughs, and headaches. Using rods of hazel, like the branches could be used to douse water. So it's quite a powerful tree. And one of the most common legends is the son of hazel. It has a few different kinds of variations on the story, but the general telling goes as follows: that there was a young lad called Fionn MacColl, I hope that I'm pronouncing that right, and as a baby he was left to the Druids for him to be taken care of by them. And his father had died in battle, and his mother worried that his father's slayers would come after him, so he was hidden away in the forest. And when he was much older, he stumbled across a pool in the woods, and a druidic master that offered him the chance to become his apprentice, learning of all the poetry and wisdom of the forest and the plants. And of course Fionn took it up, and he apprenticed with this druidic master. And he later found out about the tale of the hazels around this pool that he'd found. And there were 9 beautiful old hazel trees scattered around the pool that would drop their hazelnuts into the water, which would then be eaten by the salmon. And the salmon, who were considered the pinnacles of wisdom, would eat these hazelnuts and kind of contain all the knowledge, all the wisdom of the world. So this druidic master of course, he wanted a piece of this, and he managed to catch one of these salmon one day, and he tasked Fionn with the job of cooking him this salmon over the fire, but said, don't eat a bit, don't eat any of it, because all of this knowledge will then pass to you. Fionn was there cooking away, and he noticed a blister forming on the fish's skin. So he kind of reached out to touch it, and without thinking, burnt his finger, put it in his mouth, and just with that one little taste of the fish, all of the knowledge and wisdom that the salmon possessed passed to him. And he later went on to become quite the hero. He went and found his father's knights, and eventually became the leader of this band of knights, and became quite the hero. There's a number of Irish and Scottish, Welsh, different kind of variations on the tale, but generally they all involve the hazel being the all-knowing tree. And maybe just be careful when you eat some hazelnuts that you you don't find out some interesting things. And walking away now from the water's edge, let's step away and just have a little bit of a gentle walk down a hedgerow. And maybe some of the most common sights you'll see in the UK or common trees, I should say, are the hawthorn and blackthorn. They're often seen together, and kind of considered companions or sisters to one another. And in a lot of folklore, a lot of stories, they're kind of interchangeable in some regard. I've definitely read some stories where they say it could be a hawthorn or it could be a blackthorn. Generally, I suppose it's just the nature of the story that kind of depicts whether it's slightly more joyous or slightly more sinister in nature, as is kind of the parallel between hawthorn and blackthorn. So the hawthorn is a small tree in the rose family, commonly found in hedges, and it used to be called a poor man's bread and cheese. That the leaves could be eaten in times of great need. It was, something that was done quite in a desperate time. It's a fairy tree, like many of the others we've talked about today, and supposedly the guardian of wells and springs. It blooms as a symbol of sacrifice, and if you tie it to Christian legend, and also kind of a tree of protection, and also relates to the bringing of spring. It's obviously a tree that is really well related to the month of May. I know I love it especially. I'm a May baby, so I absolutely love the hawthorn. I love the blossom that it brings. I think it's gorgeous. But strangely, what we mentioned about the white foxgloves, the flowers are considered very unlucky to bring inside. And one of the maybe slightly more morbid things about the hawthorn is that the flowers contain a similar chemical to one that's found in decaying animal flesh. So it quite literally smells of death, which is maybe, like I said, the slightly more morbid thing about the hawthorn. But one of the maybe slightly more nicer things about the hawthorn is its legend of Joseph of Arimathea, and his trip to Glastonbury, where he placed his staff down on the top of a hill to rest, and when he woke in the morning, he saw that his branch had or his stick had then turned into a beautiful hawthorn tree that kind of bloomed as a sign that Christianity was welcome in the area. And apparently this Glastonbury thorn, as it's called now, kind of blooms at various different times of the year that it's not really supposed to. And you can go visit it if you want to. I think there's one in Glastonbury Abbey, actually. And Henry Tudor as well. I'm a Richard III girl, I'm afraid. So he's said to have took the hawthorn as a prize, has kind of claimed the hawthorn as his badge after the Battle of Bosworth, defeating King Richard, because his crown was found in a hawthorn bush. And so maybe some nice and some not so good things about the hawthorn there, but the one that's really been kind of hit hard with some bad reputation is the blackthorn. Obviously, if you're a gin lover, you might have had some sloes in your gin. Definitely would recommend it if you haven't. But it was considered quite a lucky plant. It was actually the hero of many folk tales and stories, protecting people with its thorns from all sorts of evil and monsters that were pursuing, the protagonists of these folk tales. But unfortunately, it's kind of gathered more of a grim reputation. Maybe forgive the pun, but referring to fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty and Rapunzel, where there's either a blackthorn thicket that prevents the prince from getting to the princess, or in Rapunzel, especially in the original story, the prince is blinded by the spines that are attributed to the hawthorn, and so it's definitely been or gone through some kind of rough times with its associations, especially because now I suppose it's considered a bit of a witchy tree, especially because its thorns. So if you get a particularly bad scratch or a bit of a scar from one, they can go septic, and you'll end up, potentially with a bit of an injury or quite something bad happen to you from them. But the thing about blackthorn is that it's prickly nature, and the history of distrust around it. After all that, it's still seen as a tree of protection, and kind of stands as a challenge to us that we should go no further. And when we meet one in our path, and kind of is meant to offer us feelings of determination and hope and kind of transformation. And if we kind of look back at its more traditional roots, rather than it being such a grim tree to think about. So, with all that being said, hopefully now that we're kind of reaching the end of our walk, and we've definitely met some amazing characters along the way, and met some amazing plants and some amazing trees, with magnificent stories to tell us. Unfortunately, we can't go into depth about all of the ones that you might see out there, because we'd be here all night. But hopefully we've had a brief hour or so that's taken you out of your current reality, and allowed you to spend some time in nature, and learn a bit more about it in a slightly different way. All of the plants that we've talked about today, or talked about tonight, are really important to us, even if we might not think about it, or kind of if we take them for granted a little bit. Because when we think about it and take a step back, nature is all around us. It kind of dominates our lives, even when we might not realize it. It's literally the air that we breathe. It provides us food, medicine, clothing. In some parts of the world, it's provides housing and structures and support, and we tie our seasons and our celebrations to the changing of the weather, or the loss of the leaves on the trees. Everything we do is governed by nature, and it's quite a magical thing, really, because nature has kind of evolved alongside us, as in the same way that we've evolved with nature. And I suppose I sometimes think about, and put it into perspective, the odds of it happening the way that it is, the odds that we've evolved in the way that we have, and nature has evolved with us, a teeny tiny, and it's kind of a miracle that it's happened in that way. And taking it is back to the start, when I kind of asked you to think about what you're grateful for about nature, or kind of put in the chat what you thought about nature, or what you'd like to, just if you anything you'd like to mention. we've learnt about the legend, the myth, the folklore, the history of all these plants and trees. And hopefully it's brought you a little bit closer to nature and made you think about what you're passionate about or what nature means to you specifically. Excuse me one second. Conservation especially gives us a lot of hope for nature. And it definitely starts with passion. I know, as I mentioned at the start, I certainly wouldn't be here today if I hadn't seen kind of nature or animals doing their thing, and been inspired by it. And you definitely don't have to be a scientist or a conservationist or a professional environmentalist to care about it and want to help and do something for nature. So to maybe bring us back into the present moment a little bit now and give you some practical steps to what you can do to connect with nature a little bit more. Reflect on what makes you happiest, what are you most passionate about, or what makes you confident when you step outside and kind of spend a day in nature. Where do you go? Where do you feel the most safe and secure? Are you inspired by anything in particular? Do you want to help out at home, at work, or with the community? I can't answer those questions for you, of course, but I can obviously help point you in the right direction. And you know, my email address will be kind of at the end of the presentation. So if anybody does have any questions about that kind of thing, you know, please say, and obviously we'll have some time at the end for a few questions as well. But some practical things that you can do are wildlife gardening. You know, here we've got a whole host of things that you can, if you've got the space in your garden, to get up to. You know, make a bee hotel or a bug hotel, plant some wildflowers, have a compost heap. All these things will benefit nature and help you become more involved with it. If that's not your thing, you can maybe do some painting, some photography, some writing. If you want to be more involved with the local area, you can join your local wildlife trust or the National Trust group, or the sustainability groups. So I've got Sustainable Bridge North in there as one in Shropshire area. But we're all there to do the same thing and get involved with nature and help it and protect it and conserve it in the same way. And more specifically related to the project, if there's something that you'd like to do or want to do, or even help out with our Severn B-Lines project at home, you can log your own project at the Bug Life website, and help us map the beelines, help us create the beelines, and yeah, get planting for pollinators out there. Anything that you do that was remotely going to help the wildlife, but you know, somebody would love to hear about it and love to hear what you're up to and what you find inspirational, what you're passionate about. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more about all of this and talking about a few different kinds of plants and trees, we are running another folklore guided walk in person at Erdington Nature Reserve on the 23rd of September. Excuse me. Erdington is a lovely little nature reserve just outside Bridge North. So I'll be giving you a similar kind of walk, but actually on the ground on the 23rd. So keep your eyes peeled for more information, or please feel free to email me if you kind of feel very called to it and would like to book a place. Obviously we've got a bit of time before the actual event, so it'd be lovely to hear from you if that kind of speaks to you. And like I said, here before we kind of wrap up for the evening, here are just a couple of books that helped me kind of prep for this presentation, especially the Witch's Garden, which is a Kew Botanical Gardens book. This one is quite and this one actually, The Tree Wisdom and Walking with Trees. Some beautiful books that kind of cover quite a lot of different stuff with tree folklore and healing properties and all sorts that they can be used for. And that little story I was telling you about the Shropshire folk tales is in this one here. This is actually written or composed by a group of I can't think of my words, local storytellers. There we go, in Shropshire. So this is a lovely book to read, and you know, there's plenty more out there, and obviously some on very specific topics too. So with that, it kind of brings us to the end of Myth, Mystery and Folklore. But as I said, you know, our emails are there, mine and Kate's. So if you do fancy learning a little bit more about the project or anything I've talked about today, please do get in touch. And we will be sending out some feedback forms. So if you do have some time to fill those out for us, it would be really, really, really appreciated. Gives us some insight into what we're doing well and what we can improve on, and hopefully keep these kinds of events going in the future. You know, it always benefits us, definitely. And also be an opportunity to sign up to our monthly newsletter as well if you fancy learning a little bit more about what B-Lines is up to. And I will stop sharing my screen and see if anybody's got anything question related for me to talk about.
Thanks so much for that, Kaitlyn. That was really, really fascinating and really lovely. We have got some stuff coming through on the chat. I realise we're going a little over time, but we'll spend just a couple of minutes running through just quickly what people have said, really, because they've told some really nice stories and such like. But also, personally, I just wanted to say that that was lovely, and you know, there's a lot of words batted about that are becoming more and more frequently used in our vocabulary, things like eco-grief and eco-anxiety, and a world full of problems can be very, very overwhelming. And something that's key is also looking after yourself. If looking after yourself is as crucial as looking after nature, and the two are both compatible and sit well together. And our project is building continuous landscape for wildlife to move, but it's also incredibly important to build continuous landscape and rich habitats for us to engage with and be in, you know, near our own homes. We don't have to travel to, you know, the biggest national park or a tourist area to experience nature. It should be a fundamental right that it is on our doorsteps, and we need these connected habitats to get to and to get away from, and to re-establish our relationship with nature, because we need to have it to help it. And I work in conservation, and I've suffered very much from eco-grief and eco-anxiety in the past. And what you were saying about what nature you're grateful for, I'm grateful for nature for bringing a sense of awe and a sense of humility, and being able to get out into it and hear, just feel the richness of your environment and feel small. And I think that's important, to be in awe of something. We live in a very dominionistic world, and to be in awe of something is to be humble, and to be humble is to love something and fight for it and give action. But yes, I'll just go through what some people have said. A couple of people have brought up folklore that they've heard, and interestingly, most of them have come down from parents. That kind of idea that elders pass it down. And my mum said it was bad luck to bring mayflowers into the house, Mike is saying. And I've heard that a lot. And I was on a folklore walk a few weeks ago, and apparently it's particularly bad luck for a mother or a mother-in-law. So that could be why your mother was particularly saying it. Yeah, and I also thought it was really interesting. I didn't know that, Kaitlyn, about the same chemical as in hawthorn blossoms as there is in rotting flesh. That was fascinating. Yeah, I think it's very good in some of these folklores and myths and legends to confront death through nature, because it is a part of nature, isn't it? Nicola Jones has said there's a stretch through Witham Woods in Oxfordshire called the Singing Way. In medieval times, monks on pilgrimage would burst into song along this stretch, because it's here where they would get their first view of the dreaming spires of Oxford. It's also apparently haunted by the ghost of a monk, as a little after. Very poetic. And from Charlotte O'Neill, my dad said the lords and ladies were called snake food where he was brought up, as there was a folklore about adders eating their berries to create their venom.
Wow.
Again, like you said, maybe a tale of warning.
Mm-hmm. Too creative to warn people off eating them. Yeah. See, yeah, these are lovely. Everybody, thank you so much. There's yeah, as you said, Kate, it's always great to hear what other people know, because you can research all this stuff sitting behind a desk and reading loads of books, but you never get the full picture until you start speaking to people and learning about what they know, or what you all know this evening. It's fantastic.
Definitely. Nicola's also put something else saying she's reflecting what she loves about nature, and she thinks it's just the way it feels. She went wild swimming on Tuesday to make the most of the last of the summer, and yeah, she was just talking about how it feels to be in nature, which I think is really powerful. And then Roger has raised a very important point. In November this year, the UK government will be hosting the Conference of Parties, COP26. I'm sure most of you have heard it talked about, and he's made the push to contact your local political representatives and let them know how you feel about nature. That is very powerful, and it's something that we can all do, and contact those people and let them know what we think and what we want them to do. Yeah, could have listened to tales all night from another person. Thank you, very interesting webinar. And then lots and lots of thank yous. So thank you very much, Kaitlyn.
No, and thank you everybody to sticking around and sharing from what Roger said to what Nicola said. Everybody, it's lovely to hear what nature means to you, and that was kind of the purpose of today's webinar. So thank you everybody for tuning in this evening. I suppose if anybody's got any last minute things to note, so just pop them in the chat now. But other than that, I think we can call it an evening.
Watch out for an email from Kaitlyn that will have links to our mailing list, because we've got lots of other events coming up, as well as Kaitlyn's walk and some community planting days around Telford and Bridge North. So chance to get active hands-on involvement in the project. But yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Kaitlyn, and good night, and yes, hopefully see you soon.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. Well, yeah, hopefully see you on the project sometime soon.